The courtroom stood still, the air so thick with tension that it was almost suffocating. Officer Daniel Grayson took his place on the witness stand, his uniform crisp, his posture unwavering, exuding the confidence of a man who had done this 100 times before. His voice was steady, his demeanor unreadable. He had built convictions on testimonies just like this one. But today was different. Unbeknownst to him, the woman he was about to frame wasn't just another unlucky victim caught in his web of corruption. No, she was someone far more dangerous, Special Agent Rebecca Hayes, a high-ranking FBI officer. And without realizing it, Grayson was about to commit the most catastrophic mistake of his entire career. At the defense table, Rebecca sat motionless, an air of calm surrounding her. Her piercing blue eyes swept across the courtroom, taking in every detail, every expression, every movement. She had been falsely accused of assaulting an officer and resisting arrest, charges that, for an ordinary citizen, could mean complete devastation. But Rebecca? She was far from ordinary. Instead of immediately revealing her true identity, she had chosen patience. Let him speak. Let him tangle himself in his own web of lies. She knew the truth was an unshakable force, and when it finally surfaced, it would tear him apart in the most spectacular way imaginable. Where are you watching this from today? Let us know in the comments. Grayson cleared his throat, shifting slightly in his chair, then began his well-rehearsed testimony. On the night in question, he said, keeping his tone measured and professional, the defendant was acting erratically. She refused to comply with my orders and attempted to flee. When I tried to restrain her, she struck me, right here, in the chest. He paused deliberately, letting his words sink in. I had no choice but to use force to subdue her. The prosecutor gave an approving nod, while the judge remained impassive, carefully weighing every word. The tension in the room was thick, pressing down on everyone present. But amidst it all, Rebecca's attorney, James Holloway, remained composed. With a slow, deliberate breath, he folded his hands in front of him, as if savoring the moment just before the inevitable unraveling of deception. Years of experience in high-profile cases had taught him the power of timing, the importance of waiting for just the right moment to strike. He stole a glance at Rebecca, who remained poised, her eyes locked onto Grayson with the quiet intensity of a predator waiting for its prey to make a fatal mistake. There was no nervousness in her demeanor, no fear. In fact, if anything, there was the faintest flicker of amusement in her gaze. She already knew exactly how this would unfold. Meanwhile, across the room, the jury leaned in ever so slightly, their expressions tinged with curiosity. Something about this case felt different. They had sat through countless trials, but there was an energy in the air, an unspoken expectation that told them this wasn't going to go the way Grayson assumed it would. The court clerk shifted in his seat, casting a glance toward the monitor, the one that had yet to display the most crucial evidence of the case. Grayson, on the other hand, remained oblivious, utterly unaware of the trap slowly tightening around him. Subtly, he adjusted his collar, the first sign of discomfort creeping in. Confidence had carried him into the courtroom, but control over this narrative? That was slipping through his fingers, and he didn't even realize it yet. And then finally Holloway spoke. His voice was calm, but carried the undeniable weight of someone who held every single card in his hand. Your Honor, he said, his words precise, deliberate. The defense would like to present irrefutable evidence that will change the course of this trial. Grayson stiffened slightly. Holloway glanced briefly at Rebecca before shifting his gaze to Grayson, his expression unreadable. There was no hostility in his eyes, just an unnerving confidence, the look of a man who already knew how this was going to end. He let the silence stretch, just long enough to make Grayson squirm, before he finally spoke again. Officer Grayson, Holloway began, his voice smooth yet sharp, carrying an edge that hinted at the storm about to hit. Can you confirm the exact location where this alleged assault took place? Grayson, eager to maintain control, answered without hesitation. Of course, he said, sounding as sure of himself as ever. Outside the downtown cafe on 5th Street, around 9:30 p.m., A slow, almost imperceptible smile touched the corners of Holloway's lips. "Interesting," he murmured. Then, turning toward the court clerk, he made a simple gesture. The monitor flickered to life. And in that moment, everything changed. The entire courtroom seemed to hold its breath. Every person in attendance, judge, jury, attorneys, leaned forward in their seats, anticipation gripping them like a vice. And then, the moment of truth flashed across the screen. The surveillance footage played, its crystal-clear imagery cutting through the carefully spun lies like a blade. There, on the screen, was Rebecca, walking calmly out of the cafe, her posture relaxed, her expression neutral. And then, without warning, Grayson appeared. He stormed toward her, aggression radiating from his every move. Within seconds, he shoved her against a car, forcefully restraining her, his actions devoid of justification. Not once did she behave erratically. Not once did she resist. And certainly, there was no assault. A wave of hushed murmurs rippled through the courtroom, the sheer weight of the revelation pressing down on the room. The judge frowned, his expression darkening. Across the chamber, the prosecutor blanched, their once confident demeanor faltering. Grayson stiffened. The unwavering confidence he had carried just moments before cracked like fragile glass. Beads of sweat formed at his temple, but it was too late. The truth had been laid bare for all to see. And then Rebecca finally spoke. Her voice was smooth, calm yet commanding, carrying the unmistakable authority of someone who is no stranger to control. "Your Honor," she began, reaching into her blazer pocket, "before we proceed any further, I believe it's time I formally introduce myself." She pulled out her badge, its metallic sheen catching the light as she placed it deliberately on the table for all to see. "My name is Special Agent Rebecca Hayes, Assistant Director of the FBI. And for months, I have been leading an extensive investigation into Officer Grayson and his department." A stunned silence followed, then gasps. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. The prosecutor went pale, their grip tightening around the papers in their hands. Grayson opened his mouth, but no words came out. There was nothing left to say. Rebecca leaned in slightly, her piercing gaze locking onto his. The confidence in her voice did not waver. "Not only have you lied under oath, Officer Grayson, but you've engaged in police misconduct at the highest level. Perjury is a federal offense," she continued, her tone measured yet sharp, "and rest assured, I have more than enough evidence to see that you're held accountable." The weight of her words settled over the room like a storm cloud. The judge turned toward the prosecution, his expression firm. "I believe we need to reconsider this case immediately," he declared. And just like that, in a matter of moments, the tide had turned. The false charges against Rebecca? Dismissed. The officer who had framed her? Exposed. As Grayson was escorted out of the courtroom in handcuffs, humiliation etched into his face, reality sank in. He had picked the wrong woman to frame. And now his career, his very freedom, was crumbling before his eyes. But for Rebecca, this was only the beginning. The web of corruption runs deep. Outside the courthouse, she was met by Director Andrew Calloway, a man whose presence commanded attention. His sharp gaze assessed her as he crossed his arms. "Impressive," he admitted. "But this is just the tip of the iceberg." Rebecca nodded, her expression serious. Grayson was a pawn. "We've uncovered a whole network operating within his department. Planted evidence, wrongful arrests, bribery. This is bigger than we thought." Calloway exhaled, the weight of the situation evident in his stance. "You'll have full clearance and all the resources you need," he assured her. "But be careful, Hayes. They know we're watching now." Rebecca smirked, her confidence unwavering. "Let them come. I'm ready." The investigation expands. 2 weeks later, she sat in her office, surrounded by an intricate web of photographs, documents, and red string connecting names, places, and illicit transactions. The more she uncovered, the deeper the rot seemed to go. A sharp knock interrupted her thoughts. Agent Mark Stevenson stepped in, a thick file in his hands, his expression grim. "We have a lead," he said. "An informant is willing to talk." But someone's already made an attempt on his life. Rebecca's jaw tightened. Then we need to move. Fast. That night, she and Stevenson met the informant at a safe house, a dimly lit apartment on the outskirts of the city. The man, visibly shaken, clutched the edges of his chair, his voice barely above a whisper. "This isn't just about Grayson," he muttered. "It goes way beyond him. High-ranking officials are involved, covering up their dealings with drug cartels, laundering money. If you keep digging, they'll come for you." Rebecca didn't flinch. She leaned in slightly, her voice firm. "Let them try." The battle for justice intensifies. Over the next few months, her team meticulously built their case, collecting secret recordings, insider testimonies, and financial transactions that laid bare the corruption embedded within law enforcement. As the evidence stacked up, so did the stakes. The investigation reached city officials, a district attorney, even a state senator, powerful men who had long operated with impunity. But one by one, their secrets were unearthed. And then the threats began. Late one evening, Rebecca received an anonymous call. A distorted voice, untraceable. "Drop the case, Agent Hayes," the voice warned. "Or you won't live to see it through." She hung up, unshaken. If anything, it only confirmed what she already knew. She was on the right path. Despite mounting pressure from all sides, she refused to back down. And then the moment of reckoning arrived. The trial that shook the nation. High-profile arrests followed. The entire city watched as men who once considered themselves untouchable now stood trial. For months, the courtroom became the stage for one of the most shocking corruption cases in modern history. Testimony after testimony revealed the tangled web of deceit, power, and greed that had infiltrated the system. Rebecca took the stand, her words precise, deliberate. Every name she exposed brought her closer to a dangerous truth. Someone at the very top had been orchestrating it all. And they were still out there. The final warning. Late one evening, a package arrived at her office. No return address. No identifying marks. Inside, a single file. A list of names, politicians, law enforcement leaders, business moguls. A single note was attached. "You think you won. But the real fight is just beginning." Rebecca leaned back in her chair, exhaling slowly. The war on corruption had claimed its victories, but the battle was far from over. As she gazed out her office window, the city lights twinkling in the distance, one thing was clear. She wasn't stopping until every last thread of corruption had been unraveled. Because justice? Justice was a fight worth dying for. And Rebecca Hayes was ready for whatever came next.